Hello everyone. So this will be the Beardo Live Fake versus Real article discussion, you know, the second part of that. So last week I did, one moment, I'm still a bit ill, so apologies for that. Yeah, so last week I did article discussion for Beardo Live Fake versus Real Part 1. This is going to be the discussion for Beardo Live Fake versus Real Part 2. Yeah, and if you haven't seen, earlier on today, I shared the latest article snippet about Pt2, which I'll do that every Wednesday, same with live streaming. So I'll hope to do the snippets on about 6 o'clock on a Wednesday and live streaming about 8 o'clock. And then after this live stream, I'll be live on TikTok, basically saying the same stuff that I'll be saying in this live stream, but in a way which is under an hour. I've got my notes here, so if you keep looking down, it's the notes on that. I've not looked over my notes for a while with that article. My memory is awful, so everything that I'm saying here and now, it may differ from the article a fair bit. I can't remember what I wrote there, so I'm kind of reacting to my notes, as it were. So it starts off, the second part, with an important comment from Fiona Kerr. Also, I should probably mention as well, Beardo's live stream. So Beardo is a YouTuber. His channel is Beardo Gets Scared. His live stream occurred in August. I believe it was the 14th of August. I could be wrong with that, but I think that was then. And the stream lasted for about 3 hours. And the reason why I'm making these videos and writing these articles is because I want to try and document that kind of thing, because I feel it was an incredibly important discussion that occurred, with many good points raised. And the issue with YouTube and doing a YouTube video, which is why I've also got it in article format as well as this video, is when you do a live stream for 3 hours, right? Like in the case of Beardo's live stream here. So you live stream for 3 hours, had a really good discussion in it. But that is, one, it's 3 hours. You're going to lose bits and pieces amongst that, because not everyone's going to watch a 3 hour long live stream. And then that 3 hours, because he live streams regularly, he puts loads of different videos on his channel, that live stream gets lost within his own videos, and that gets lost within the whole thing of YouTube. So with my articles, I like to try and document these kinds of things, because it's far easier to find in an article format on a website which documents these things, as opposed to going onto YouTube and either, you know, the only way you're going to discover it after the fact is if YouTube randomly shows it to you. And it's unlikely that would happen with a 3 hour long live stream, I think. And so I'm trying my best to document it and to try and highlight what a good discussion it was, try and get publicity for the teams involved as well. So the teams involved in this particular part as well, I should also say. So at this point, it was, again, I've got to try and remember because I'm looking over the notes here. So Joe Vitale has just entered the live stream. And with that, I believe Paranormal by the Sea was also still involved. Obviously Beardo from Beardo Gets Scared was involved. You've also got Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast, and you've got Paul from Ghost on Trent. So these were all the people involved during this point. So, start off with the thing. The second part, important comment from Fiona Kerr. So Fiona said, okay, so here's a question. So I totally get that there are fakers, totally, but what if certain spirits are drawn to certain people? Now I personally think that's quite a good point, because quite often you'll hear people saying, oh, they're getting loads of activity because the spirits are naturally drawn to them, or when other people aren't getting activity, it'll be the opposite of, oh, the spirits aren't drawn to them, they're not kind of performing for them. Which I think is a fair point, because I think of spirits as people. In theory, spirits are just dead people. And certain people will interact better with other people, if that makes sense. So if you were to meet me randomly, you may get on with me, we may have a brilliant discussion, you may not get on with me, we may not talk at all. I feel the same would be the case with spirits and investigators. Some spirits may just be naturally drawn to the personalities of investigators and will want to interact with them more and want to get their attention more than others. So that's my own views on it. I think it's a really good question, a really good point to have brought up. Beardo's response, again, he kind of agreed. He says they probably are or can be, but they're not on YouTube. So by that, he kind of meant that the teams you see on YouTube, they're not getting activity week in, week out because the spirits are drawn to them. And he goes on to say that people are going to different places all over the world, and they're getting activity week in, week out without fail. And those people, they're lying because that's not how it works. And I agree with him there. I do think that some spirits can be drawn to some people, but I don't think when you're going from location to location that you're always going to have spirits drawn to you. Because like I say, in regards to the living world, if I was to go to my next door neighbours, they might get on really well with me. But if I was to go to a house in a different city randomly, they might not get on with me at all. It's all to do with the individual people. So just because a spirit in a location is drawn to you doesn't mean that every spirit in a location will be drawn to you. So if you have investigators going to all these different places, then it's very unlikely that every place they visit, the spirits will be wanting to interact with them because they're drawn to them. So where that could be, I think that it's unlikely. And Beardo does as well. And Ghost on Trent says, if it's the case, then debunkers are debunking spirits, as debunkers are debunking the activity that they're generating, such as masks, people throwing things, and strings being pulled. So his point there is basically saying that the debunkers, because they're noticing these techniques, if it's a case of our spirits creating the thing, then it's the spirits using those techniques, which just sounds absurd for spirits to have to use string, etc., and technological things. So he makes a good point. And Beardo said some debunkers don't believe in the paranormal at all, and others like himself believe and come from a place of belief. Which, fair enough. Paranormal Monkey Podcast, so Justin says, if a spirit is drawn to someone known for faking and they get spirit activity, you won't know about it, which I think is an excellent point. I do think that if you start faking things, no one's going to trust you if you're caught out on the fakery. It's always best to do it legitimately, for multiple reasons, more than just people don't believe you, because it should be legitimate anyway. And he compares it to a boy who cried wolf scenario and says you won't know what's real and what's fake. If you're caught faking monster, respect of the channel plummets, and people won't believe anything, even if they do go on to catch a real paranormal event. And I absolutely agree with him here. If you've read any of my articles on Most Haunted, I do kind of raise this point a bit with them, especially when discussing whether or not I think they're legitimate. Because I think just because a team has been caught faking doesn't mean that every member in that team has faked. And of course, I'm not saying go watch Most Haunted, they're absolutely legitimate, they're not. They're really not. My article assessing whether or not they were showed as much. But in that article, there were questions raised around certain team members in Most Haunted. So Carl and Stuart absolutely had skewed results in terms of the amount of activity that they were experiencing. And Glenn and Greg had the opposite, where they had skewed results so they didn't experience anything, and Yvette was kind of in the middle. And I think from looking at that, Carl and Stuart, I think, are the fakers in that team. Yvette might know about it, she might not, she might be involved, she might not, I don't know. And again, Glenn and Greg, they may know about it, but I don't think they're faking. So in the case of this, about teams catching legitimate activity, Most Haunted are still going to locations with this bits of fakery thing, and they're still going to locations which are said to be haunted, so they very well could have genuine experiences which have not been faked. So, as I say, there were one or two moments that Glenn and Greg experienced, and even though I gave explanations as to how that could have been an overlay because they didn't hear it at the time, or it could have been, they know something's a bit off, and so they've kind of hinted at it. It could be a case they had a legitimate experience. I think, for instance, Greg, he heard lots of tapping, but he said it was faint tapping. Now, that could have been a team member messing with him and being in the building without him knowing, but it also could have been legitimate. Granted, in one of the places, I still maintain that the tapping he heard was a drip, because you could hear a dripping noise on the camera. And I do think because it's clear that water was leaking in. But that could have been legitimate tapping haunted experience type thing for him. But because most haunted is known to be faking things and is known to kind of manufacture any tapping, because that rapidly it increases a lot with Carl and Stewart, you look at that and you're like, I want to believe him because he seems legitimate, but he's part of this wider team which is not legitimate, and so it brings the whole thing down. And so I agree here with this point. And so Beardo says, if one of the channels, such as Sam and Colby, came out and said everything was fake up to this point, it wouldn't damage them. But if they captured something, then no one would believe them. Which is a fair point, I think, because I don't know his channel. I do not know his channel. He's from Laney and Ben. It's Ben from Laney and Ben, but he's got his own channel where he's debunking, or looking at videos and kind of maybe reacting, but providing explanations. I don't know, I've not seen his videos. But he went from the fake Laney and Ben channel to that, and he's recently admitted that all the Laney and Ben stuff was fake, but I don't think it's damaged him on his new channel. I could be wrong with that, but if he was to then go out investigating, people wouldn't believe him because he's admitted to having faked things in the past. So I absolutely believe what Beardo said here. And he said that he and Paul from Ghost on Trent went to the Jumanji house and experienced things that other teams had experienced there. But people won't believe those other teams, even though it seems that their experience may have been genuine, as they have lied in the past. Which, again, bringing back my point to Most Haunted, they are going to locations which are said to be haunted, where people have said they've experienced things. And I know I've written about locations where I'm like, I think Most Haunted just made all this stuff up and the hauntings have been marketing purposes, and Most Haunted have been part of that, potentially. I don't know for sure. But I think, looking at this, fake teams could, because they are still going to legitimately haunted locations, for the most part. I know some people lie about the locations they've gone to, but for the most part, they're going to places that are haunted, or are said to be haunted. And so it would, in theory, they have caught at least one legitimate piece of evidence in their video, I would think, because, I mean, I investigated this house that I'm in, which is not haunted at all. Like, yeah, I don't believe, well, I wouldn't say not haunted at all. It's not actively haunted. I think there's a difference between haunted and actively haunted. So I think that there are spirits here, I just don't think that they're doing things. But when I investigated here, stuff started to happen. Now, was that a psychological thing? Probably. But other stuff, it was weird. Just weird things happened. My bag fell off the side of the kitchen. Could have been a coincidence. It's not happened since. It never happened before. So for it to have happened at that specific moment, that's a strange coincidence, to say the least. So, yeah. That's the... You know, so this is what I mean by haunted locations. You could go to somewhere not haunted, so some teams that lie about where they're going, they could just stay at a B&B or whatever, and say, oh, we're actually at this really old place, but then they could still get activity, because I do think anywhere with any human interaction at all with that location has potential to have at least one spirit there. And yeah, so... Joe then says he's talked about it a few times and that people could have been having a real experience, but the credibility just isn't there, so you don't believe them. But then Ghost on Trent, Paul, he says, on the flip side, you can also have a genuine team who's built up trust with people, and then if they go on to fake something, people are more likely to believe it. And that he's seen some channels start off legitimately, or at least they seem legitimate, but then they fake things eventually, and people are more inclined to believe the fakery. And he says he can't be biased when looking at either side of it. And I agree, I do think that if you have a history of being legitimate and not getting much at all in investigations and being like, look, I'm being very scientific, I'm being very legitimate, I've been being extremely kind of by the book, as it were, with things, then if something does happen, people are more inclined to believe that because they know that you haven't seemed to fake things in the past. So when something does happen, they're like, oh, this is the moment, this is when something has eventually happened. An excellent example, Ghosts of Britain. They're one of the teams where I don't know about. I don't know if they fake things or not. It's been a while since I've seen them, and they're very, in their titles, over the top clickbaity type thing, and I don't like that. But when I first started watching them, and again, this goes back to the point I was making about Most Haunted, with you don't know if certain team members are faking things and certain ones are legitimate. When I first started watching them with their live streams, it was when Lee and Lindsay Steer were still part of the team. It was like a couple of years ago. And the first live stream I watched, they had a guy on there who was a medium, or claimed to be a medium. I'm very, very biased in my outlook on mediums. I do not trust them. I'm aware that they can exist, and they probably do exist, but I don't trust them. But with this team, I watched an investigation they did. I don't know where they were. It was a house type setting, but they did table tipping, and the table full on went for it. And I was like, this is interesting. And I kept watching them, and then this guy appeared on another one of their live streams, and they were like, oh look, this guy's back. And I was like, okay, interesting. Because I had doubts around the table tipping, and he was part of the table tipping incident. And again, with him being a medium, I was like, And then the moment he went off camera and out of view of the normal team members, suddenly you hear a loud bang followed by him crying out in pain, and then straight away I was like, he's faking stuff. And I don't know if he's been brought back on their lives. I don't know, but it was very suspicious. The fact the moment he goes out of view, you hear a loud bang followed by him doing what I can only refer to as a Derek Acora impression. So this is what I mean here. Ghost of Britain, they seemed like a legitimate team, but then that team member or guest, he's not really a proper member of the team, but he's a guest with them. He then did some stuff which I don't deem legitimate, but people might watch it and be like, oh, Ghost of Britain are a legitimate team, that means he must be legitimate, they'll have done their research on him, they'll trust him. And then when that happens, like, oh my god, this is a legitimate thing, he's actually getting possessed, or whatever, you know? So you've got to be wary of that, which is why you can't look at any team in a biased setting. It's why whenever I refer to Most Haunted, and the reason I keep bringing them up is because they're the only ones that I know well. I grew up watching them, I've done articles on them, I've done my research into the team members. They're the only team that I can actually refer to, and I think that they're always a good example. So if you're looking at a team like Most Haunted or someone else, you can't be biased. So even though, yes, there's a history of Most Haunted with them being fake, and you might have another team which you're like, oh, they have a history of being legitimate, you can't use their history to judge their present investigation. So when you're watching one of their videos, you need to judge it as a standalone video. That is how I would always trust it. Like, that's how I would always do that rather than trust it. I wouldn't just trust it. But you get my point. You have to watch each video as an individual situation where you cannot judge it on, I'm looking for fakery because I know they're fake, or I'm just going to sit back, relax, watch because I know they're legitimate. You can't do either one of those. You have to look at it through an unbiased lens of, they're saying this is an investigation, they're saying it's legitimate, let's see. And then when something happens, you need to stop, you need to look at it and be like, how was that done? Or how did that occur? Rather than how was that done? Because if you go with the mindset of how was that done, you're immediately thinking they faked it. But if you look at how did that occur, you're taking into account not only the fact that they could have faked it, but also that it could have been an environmental factor, where it's just random. So yeah, so I think you always have to look at them from an unbiased perspective. And just in front of the Paranormal Monkey podcast, then added saying, ones that really annoy him are the ones that portray themselves as skeptical or have an outlook to debunking and then are later caught for faking. And I agree there. I think you can't do it. Like, if you're faking it, don't pretend you're not faking it. But you never know. A lot of those ones, they may not be intentionally faking. They may just be misinformed. There may be things happen they haven't noticed. So there's a difference with those. So then another comment came in from the world of Mr. Grey with the question of who comes up with these ridiculous names for places like Jumanji House, Hell House, Demon House. There's about 20 of them now, lol. And Beardo said in response to this that in the UK there is a reason, and that reason is so people don't give a location away for others to go there and trash it. And he says that with the Jumanji House there are vines going up along the walls along with games inside it, and so they're just not giving away the location, which I agree with that. I know when hearing about it here in Demon House, Hell House, etc., you can be like, oh, that's a bit clickbaity, a bit, cliche horror film. But there is a purpose, because a lot of teams do go out and investigate abandoned locations, and in that case you need to protect the identity of where the location is. I have done it myself, even though I've not looked at abandoned locations. I have done an investigation at what I would deem as a fairly high profile place. It's somewhere that you'll likely know. And so as a result, because I didn't get proper permission, I did get some permission, but not proper. As a result, I decided to keep it anonymous and just call it Location X, which you'll see on the database. I've got word lists from which I've analysed from those investigations. So yeah, so it's just protecting the location. I've done it. Granted, I've not gone as dramatic as Demon House or Hell House, but it is a necessity. And yeah, so Beardo then says to Joe Vitale, he kind of prompts him by saying he wants to bring up something that he thinks is relevant about actual buildings, and them basically letting people get away with murder to sell tickets. I'm going to have a quick drink. And Joe then said some very interesting stuff, which I absolutely, from having researched a number of locations, I don't know how many locations I've researched at this point, on the database there are over 123 articles. Some of those are word lists, some of those are journal entries, so I'm thinking I must have done, it's definitely at least 50 locations. It's probably somewhere between 50 and 100. So I know from doing the research on those places, what Joe says here is true. So he says that teams go to locations, they get told a story, they then run with that story. But if the teams did the research, then they'd find in about 10 minutes that the stories that they're told about the place aren't actually true. And he says that most locations in America are good about their history, and they'll say, if they're not sure on something, this is what we've heard, don't know if it's true, and he says that's really great. They do that. He's been to locations in the past and heard nothing about demons, and then a new owner's taken over and suddenly there's a demon there, and teams as a result run with demons. He says that other owners won't say demons, but they also won't care if investigators say otherwise, as it brings business to the building. And he says that other owners do call out investigators who make false claims. And this is all very interesting. It kind of links in with the events companies that can be at these locations. But in terms of putting event companies aside, because I know they are discussed at some point, the actual owners saying what the history of the location is and saying this is the hauntings that we've got, here's our history, here's our hauntings. That I absolutely know some places make it up for publicity. Through the research that I have done, it seems inevitable. My recent article on the Schooner Hotel, I believe, is one of those locations. It might not be, I could be wrong with that. But that particular location, at the end, my own thoughts, I say, I'm pretty sure this is just marketing purposes, because you've got it being awarded like the most haunted hotel in Britain by the British Poltergeist Society in 1998. Yet one of the sources, the Paranormal Database, who I've used a couple of times as a source, they're very matter of fact, to the point. So I do trust that source. They've said that there's no record that they could find of the Poltergeist Society existing, and so it seems like that was all just a marketing ploy. And from also having found out that the building kind of fell into somewhat disrepair, it wasn't great. They had to close the kitchen for a bit, so they would want to get publicity. If it was that bad for that amount of time, they'd want to get publicity. The paranormal is a good way of getting history into older locations, getting publicity into older locations, rather. And so, yeah, I absolutely believe some owners of some locations will say, here's the history, do not question it, you have to use this. And some might do that because they're like, this is true history, use this, don't deviate. But others may very well be like, here's our history, we don't know anything, but here's the history, you use that. And so teams write about that, or they make videos on that, and as a result you get a lot of misinformation. It's why a lot of articles I've written on locations have been like, there's this big contradiction and there's this big contradiction, and I don't know which one's true. Because no doubt that's one of those situations where other sources, other teams, etc., the locations will have said, here's the history, and then another team's gone in and gone, no, here's the history, and as a result you've got the conflicting things, and you don't know which is true. Which is unfortunate, because it really does muddy the history sometimes. And like I said, with sometimes there's no demon and suddenly there's a demon, brings the investigators in. Especially the modern YouTube, TikTok type investigators. They always say about demons, which, no. I mean, I think demons potentially, in some kind of form, could exist. I personally just view them as negative spirits who go off negative energy, but that's a variation. And loads of different cultures have some sort of form of demonic entity that exists across the world, and so I'm like, something probably exists along those lines. Whether or not it's, you know, the full-on religious aspect, I don't know, but yeah, it's, not everywhere is going to have a demon, not everywhere. You might encounter a negative spirit here or there, but I don't think they're that common. Beardo then says that one lady went against a channel as big as Sam and Colby for disrespecting the house, which was a massively brave thing to do, and other owners would let them get away with it, which, yeah, some owners absolutely would. It's why you have all these contradictions online about places, because some owners just will not kind of fight back against it. They're like, oh, well, you've completely muddied our history, but it's bringing people in through the door, so we're happy with that. And Jordan said he goes to American locations and hears that the owners don't want any fake investigators back, as it was all a lie, but others don't care, which again, it shows that it can vary from place to place. Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast said he had issues with 39 DeGray Street. I don't know why I put in... Oh, in Hull. No, I thought I said in Wall then. I was like, no, it's not in Wall. So yeah, he had issues with 39 DeGray Street in Hull. And as the owner was spinning a narrative about it being... Oh yeah, a one-time mortuary and different... Yeah, I'm going to start that again because I could not read my own handwriting. So, he said he had issues with 39 DeGray Street in Hull as the owner was spinning a narrative about it being a one-time mortuary, and there were other tales along with that, and people that were renting the place couldn't stay due to it being so haunted. And so, Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast brought a historian with them, and the historian said that it had no link to being a mortuary, along with other things that contradicted the owner's stories. And as a result, they had to keep the owner and the historian separate as threats occurred between the two, which I find quite funny. That the owner was so adamant, because I'm assuming the threats came from the owner and not the historian. That makes no sense to me. But yeah, the fact the owner was so adamant of, no, this is the history, but then you had an actual historian arguing otherwise, kind of makes you wonder. I mean, for all I know, the owner could have believed his own nonsense in that case, if he's getting that thingy about it, or he's just panicking because he's suddenly like, oh no, if this all goes, if it's revealed this history isn't true, then I lose business. That could also be another panic, because he loses money. So Justin then said some places before letting a team in say this is the history and stick to it, and that they want no mention of demons and want to see the video before it goes on YouTube, as they don't want the location muddied by tales of demons. Now, that I agree and disagree with. I think that's a very, very, very strict way of doing it. I think some locations, if it's in a religious area, for instance, Bible Belt in America, they would absolutely, I mean, they'd be hesitant on any investigations, let alone demons. But like I say, my own view on demons is that they're just spirits, they're just negative spirits that work on negative energy. Just like angels are just positive spirits that work on positive energy. I don't believe the heaven, hell, religious connections with those. I think that it's just a case of positive and negative for how that spirit is behaving. So in the case of this particular thing, if an owner's being that strict, you don't have to say demon. You don't have to say angel, you don't have to say demon. So that is one thing, I suppose. But if you go somewhere, because I do think negative spirits can exist, and I do think some cultures would call that negative spirit a demon if they're really negative or shown to be violent, like a violent poltergeist, something like that. I'm not sure, but I think if you go and investigate and discover that kind of thing, for the owner to be like, no demons, I think that again it kind of muddies the truth. If they're preventing you from saying what you have genuinely found, then that's kind of crossing that line. I get them not wanting to say demons, etc., but I still think it crosses that line. You need to have the ability to not only tell the real history, but you also need to say what you genuinely do find is at a place. And if that is a negative spirit, it is a negative spirit. Which, again, if it's really pushing it on the side of negative, then, you should always raise the possibility of maybe this thing is here, but this is what we've found, this is what we've experienced, this is what's led us to that conclusion. So it's kind of crosses the line with that one, I think. But I get why they do it, because if you look at a lot of YouTube things, people really do push the, oh my god, we're going to die, it's a demon, blah, 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 that kind of aspect, which, not good. So Joe then says a couple of locations do that, and they want to see and okay the footage first. Some teams go there, they claim that there's a demon, they release the video, and then the owner isn't happy. And he does go on to say about the Bible Belt, and say it's hard enough to get a hands on a location due to the paranormal. And when word about a demon got out, the owner then got in a lot of trouble from the city about it. I wrote about one particular thing which relates to this. I don't know if this is the owner, but it could very well be the owner. It was a castle. I wrote it wasn't a location article, it was an experience type article where I've transcribed something from the Overnight channel because they interviewed the owner of, it's like Python or Pythian, it's something like that, but it's a castle in America. They interviewed the owner, it's in the Bible Belt, and the owner said they got a lot of trouble around that place, and it took them ages to get a license for the place because word got out that it was haunted, and so the city were extremely reluctant and they wouldn't give her a license, and so she actually ran for mayor to try and give herself a license. Because she was like, oh, they're not giving me a license, so she had to kick up that much of a fuss before they did eventually just give it and give her a license for it. So that's how strict they are on the Bible Belt about the paranormal, which I don't quite get, because heaven and angels and things is all religious, and that is all paranormal too. So I don't know why they're like, oh, don't mess with it at all, kind of thing. But yeah, it's. I mean, you had Jesus raising people from the dead. I don't, necromancy right there. So, yeah, this is. It seems like a contradiction to me. Whenever anyone says I'm religious, therefore it's wrong to mess with that stuff, I'm just like, Jesus messed with that stuff all the time. Anyway, yeah. So, Joe continued by saying, on the other side, some people say his history, stick to it, don't debunk it, and as a result, lawsuits get involved. And I think that with that point, you kind of emphasise that some places will give out the wrong history, and will kind of sue people if they try and debunk their history, which you can do a fair bit, I think, with certain locations. And investigators then are trying to figure out what's going on. They can't say, and if they can't say these people weren't here and this didn't happen, then that makes it stranger and helps the location more, if anything else. So yes, it's basically saying some teams are kind of prevented from debunking locations in terms of what the history is that they're given. So Beardo then was asked his thoughts on teams like Smug Puppy. Asks his thoughts rather on teams like Smug Puppy or Really Haunted, where the cuts can be seen and it's done in the house and it seems lazy. And Paranormal Monkey podcast, Justin, he says he doesn't want to start ranting and that's pure laziness doing it in their homes, and that faking makes the paranormal a laughing stock, and there are sloppy methods of making things, and that just adds to the paranormal seeming like a joke, which I half agree with. I think if you're involved in the paranormal and you're doing it from your house, I don't think that is a particularly wrong thing. So, for instance, when I write my articles, I do it from my own house. I do not view that as lazy. I don't have the money to be able to go to locations and properly research in that way. So there are things that can restrict certain people. In the case of the fake channels, where they're saying, my house is haunted, look at all the stuff, and they're faking it, that is quite lazy. Especially when the video... If they've been doing it for a while in the video, you can still see the cuts and the edits and all that lot and how it's done, then I think that's lazy. If they've only just started it, I don't think it's lazy. I think it might just be a case of they haven't learned how to do the technology yet. Good example, myself with article snippets. I have only just started doing those, so they look quite bland. I want to try and improve them in the future, but I am not yet at that point because I haven't learned enough about the technology. So I think it's a bit... it can be viewed as lazy, but at the same time, it might not be lazy. It's one of those iffy ones. But if they've been doing it for a while and they haven't improved, and I mean, it's wrong anyway because they're faking it, but it's not great. And I'm not familiar with these particular videos, like from Smug Puppy and Really Haunted that they're talking about. But yeah, I've seen like bits and pieces from when Beardo's debunked them, and it's not good. You can clearly see that it's fake. And Paranormal by the Sea. So Dolly says it's frustrating. She wants to bring real evidence of the truth, and it doesn't cost the fake people, and they're sloppy with the videos. Steve says it's annoying going to a location where other teams have gone and got lots of views, but then they've hardly gotten anything, and they hear nothing there, but then they don't want to call out and get negativity brought to their channel, and they are thankful for having debunkers do it for them. Which I agree, that is a good thing with debunkers, and is one reason why debunkers exist, because when you call out a big team, I know Beardo has recently done a video saying about Twin Paranormal, and that their fan base can be quite negative when it comes to anyone calling out the Twin Paranormal team. And as a result, if I was to suddenly start calling them out, or another investigator was to start calling them out, it brings a lot of negativity to the channel. So if it's just the debunkers that are doing that, then it's still bringing negativity, but they're happy to kind of take that hit. and it's kind of more akin to their what their job kind of is with the debunking, to in a way get that negativity, even though you shouldn't get the negativity. I don't condone that at all, but or approve of that rather. But it's one of those awful situations where you're gonna get negativity if you kind of call anyone out. And Ghost and Trent agrees, and they don't watch that kind of nonsense, but occasionally come across live streams on TikTok, and he gets banned from saying that the K2 meter is flickering because they are live on their phone, which I find quite a funny thing. Just imagine going through a live and then just suddenly seeing someone's live and being there and going, oh, K2's flickering because you're live on your phone, and then suddenly you get banned for it. I just find it to be a funny situation. But again, it's very true. The K2 meter, as I have discovered through investigations, is very sensitive to technology. I don't know how it would react regarding cameras. I'm imagining that they cause it to flicker. So anyone who suddenly does this close-up on the K2 meter and being like, look, it's flickering, and sudden close-up and the camera's like right against it, the camera is probably going to be the thing causing it to flicker. And yeah, so he says he doesn't watch any of those, he doesn't think that they're legitimate, and it's frustrating and sad that people show him really haunted and small puppy videos. And he thinks that it's a case of young people are unaware of the real paranormal, that they will then see a fake video posted by YouTube first, and they'll then find that YouTube fake video interesting, and they'll then find a real video because they're suddenly interested in the paranormal, but then they'll watch that and say it's boring and they'll never watch it again, because the difference between the real and the fake is quite large. The fake paranormal, you've got stuff quite frequently happening. You can often have over-dramatic behaviour, shouting, screaming, running away from things, kind of typical Scooby-Doo-esque moments. But then real paranormal investigation videos are very quiet in comparison. It's just any noise probably comes from the team having a bit of a laugh and a joke to try and keep themselves entertained, and to try and entertain the viewers. But really it is just being in a dark room by yourself or with a couple of other people, listening for things happening, occasionally calling out. Maybe you'll have one or two bits of technology there, but it won't be constant REM pod activity going, oh my god, it's lighting up. It won't be that. So Beardo then says that the first time he watched the Ouija Brothers, he found it boring and turned it off. The Ouija Brothers, I believe, are a legitimate team. Beardo definitely thinks highly of them, as do other people. But he said he found it boring and he turned it off because he kind of forgot what the real paranormal was like. And Joe from Entity 7 Paranormal said it's frustrating that people in the paranormal haven't been properly taught or trained, and that it's just copy and paste from what they've seen. He says it's lazy and it's actually lots of work as investigating, and as you're both investigating and creating content for YouTube, and lots of channels only stay somewhere for 4 hours and then go to the next location. I agree in terms of it being copy and paste. I don't think people are thinking of their own things. And to be fair, this is a point where it's why I use cat balls. Even though I know cat balls are controversial and some people don't like them at all, I believe that there's potential, because when I started getting interested in the paranormal, it was from watching Most Haunted on TV. But then as I wanted to go into investigating, I started thinking about trigger objects and thought spirits probably don't have much energy like what we have to move things in the physical environment, so you'll need something extremely lightweight and ideally round, which can be moved. When I saw cat balls being used, I immediately thought, that's perfect. I've also seen ping pong balls being used, but I think they're too lightweight. They can be blown by a draft quite easily. But a cat ball, it's that kind of thing where it's round, and as well people say about the ball bearing inside being moved, which causes it to light up. Could be spirits moving the ball bearing, which is even smaller, even lighter, less likely to be attracted by a breeze, etc., because it's within a ball. So that's why I keep using those. And in conjunction with a random word generator, if the word generator says something to do with the cat ball at the same time the cat ball lights up, then that's two independent pieces of technology interacting with one another, which I think just adds further evidence that the cat ball lighting up in that moment was legitimate, or that the word being spoken at that moment was legitimate. Could be a coincidence, but this is why you have to analyse these things. But yeah, so copy and paste from what I've seen. Again, a good point. When I did a bunch of live streams, I had the light switched off. I have two tablets, one of which I did a live stream on, the other one I had the word generator on, and then I had a camcorder recording when I was doing the investigations last year. And I had the light off, so you couldn't see anything on the live stream, but you could hear what was happening, you could see if anything lit up. And then I uploaded the camcorder footage as well, which was night vision. And I had someone ask me why I had the light off. And straight away I stopped and I thought, and I was like, I don't actually know, because it's not my own theory. I've seen it on Most Haunted, and so I've done that. Because it is how people do it. So I absolutely agree with Joe, where people have watched these programs and they've seen methods and techniques being used, and they're not using their own methods that they've thought of. They're using someone else's, and they don't necessarily know why. And that can be seen as lazy. But you do have to start somewhere. If you start off using a particular method that you've seen and it's not getting you anywhere, and you've not adapted or changed, then I think continue doing the same thing could be seen as lazy. But if you've adapted and changed it over time, then I think it's a bit more, it's a bit better. It's not quite as lazy. And as I said, it's lots of work. It is lots of work. From watching a YouTube video, you wouldn't believe how much work goes into paranormal investigating. And I personally believe less work goes into it from investigators than what should be. I think teams should be doing more because, and I'm guilty of this as well, I think that if you do an investigation, you need to follow it up with analysis of the investigation. And through analysis, I don't mean just edit a video and upload that video and highlight things here and there. I mean, if you've used a random word generator, for instance, you need to look through the word frequency. If you have activity occurring through your video, you need to look at the frequency of activity, compare that to frequency of activity of other locations. For all I know, this behind the scenes work could be occurring, but I don't think it is. And if it is occurring, teams need to publish it somewhere. It's a lot of work. Just to do the videos alone, it's a lot of work. But I think even more work needs to be put into it to really see if there is any differentiation between locations and investigations. And only then can you kind of compare results and figure it out if there was anything there or not. Because again, you can't trust eyes and ears. Anything you see here, you can't trust any of that. So you need to take note of specific things caught on camera, and you need to cross-analyse your investigations. And I don't think teams do that. I think they just go out for a night, record an investigation, and then upload the video and class that video as their results when it's not. The actual, what they've experienced is the data, is the results. But they don't look too much into that. So certain teams probably do, but others do not. So he said, lots of channels only stay somewhere for 4 hours and then go to the next location. I don't think staying somewhere for 4 hours is particularly lazy. I think it's a quick way of making content, but I don't think that's lazy. When I did investigations here, I only investigated for an hour at a time. Sometimes it got to about an hour and a half. Investigations can be extremely draining, and you can get a lot of work out of it. Like I say, if you want to do it properly, if you want to analyse your results, you probably want to try and stick to an hour, because you're going to have a lot of analysis to do if you go for more than that. Now, granted, for the teams who don't do the analysis and just upload a video, it helps to go for a long period of time because nothing's happening in the videos, so you can kind of cut it down and maybe you'll get more stuff happen, which means you can cut it down to be a longer video and it will seem somewhat entertaining. But you're probably not going to be doing the analysis side of things. And like I say, I've been guilty of that. I investigated the 28-day cycle last year, pretty much this time last year. And as a result, I went for about 17 days before it kind of got derailed by birthday celebrations. Plus, I got incredibly drained from it all. and I did intend on analysing it, but I've never had the chance because I've been really wrapped up with writing all the articles this year. So again, I've been guilty of not doing the analysis, but it is something I think teams should try and strive for and try and push for, even though it is difficult. But you've got to try and, if your income and if your focus, because at the moment I'm not getting any income from this, but other teams I know will get income from their videos, and if that is their income, if that is their focus, then they'll have to try and stick with that. They need to try and upload all of this content to try and keep the revenue in, and they don't have the time then. Like, if doing the analysis sacrifices what's generating their revenue, they're not going to do it, because it's not a profitable thing for them to do, which is unfortunate, and as a result I don't think we'll get much closer to proving the paranormal, as it were, because you need to look at the analysis side of things. Anyway, yeah, so Beardo then says there's a well-known UK team, which makes out that they're at a location the whole night, but they've only spent 2 hours in each location, and then faked things while there, and then moved on, doing another 3 or 4 locations in one night, and that they've only spent 6 hours making a month worth of footage. He says that's lazy, and they're lying to the audience about the location, and that it takes him roughly 5.5 hours to get to 30 East Drive. He investigates there for 12 to 15 hours, and then 5.5 hours to drive home on 2 hours of sleep. All just for a top 5 channel to take his footage, edit out the debunk, and then claim that there's a ghost there. And with that, I agree that it is lying to an audience about potentially lying to them about locations. They might not be lying about the location. I don't know what team he's referring to. Again, I don't think it's lazy just doing a couple of hours. I think when you have schedules and when you have allocated time to try and upload things and to try and get good quality videos out there, again, I don't know what team this is, but I don't think that it's lazy. Because at the end of the day, if they're, I mean, what does he say? 3 or 4 locations a night and then 2 hours per thing. So you're still doing 6 to 8 hours of work a night, which is standard for a working day. And if this well-known team was in connection with a TV channel, you're going to have things in place there, probably saying you can only work an 8-hour shift, or maybe at most a 10-hour shift, right? Because you've got the whole workers' rights thing. If you're independent uploading stuff to YouTube, you can work as long as you want to work. But if you have other companies involved, you get all sorts of things to do with working hours probably involved. So I think if they're just doing kind of 8 hours a day, I don't think that's lazy, I think that's standard. And I think from what Beardo's described of him doing a 5.5 hour drive to investigate for 12 to 15 hours to do a 5.5 hour drive back on 2 hours of sleep, I think that's going above and beyond. I don't think that's the expectation for anyone. I think that is very much so absolutely insane, above and beyond for that kind of footage. And granted, his content's very good and it is appreciated and whatnot, but I think he's given bad examples there. I think you can't slate a 8-hour working day because you're working a 20-hour day. And I don't think you can make those comparisons and it be a fair comparison. I don't think you can call one lazy and the other. The other is, like I say, one is standard, the other is vastly overachieving and overworking and is probably not good for your health. Which is why I say if TV channels get involved, you probably have a whole workers' rights thing involved, which limits the amount of hours that they could feasibly work. So, Paranormal Monkey Podcast then says some fake channels must see the paranormal as a joke, and they do it for views and subscribers, and they're trying to portray something as real when it isn't. That's disrespectful to those who want to do it for legitimate reasons and want to capture something genuine. Which I agree. I do think that anyone who fakes the paranormal content, they don't necessarily see it as a joke. Again, TV channels, if they're involved, if TV channels get involved, if other companies get involved, there is then a demand on you and your content. They will then say you need this much content, it needs to be to this standard. Jason Hawes has discussed this about some episodes of the program he did. I can't remember what the program was he did, but he did do a program. He said that some episodes never aired because they were considered boring, as nothing happened. And he said that one episode where they debunked the location, the TV channel, the network was very against airing that episode because they're like, oh, that's boring, that's not proper paranormal, it's going against the thing we want to push. But then Jason Hawes he pushed that episode and be like, no, we need this episode to be done because it shows that certain places do fake it for investigators. And so they did then publish that episode, or release that episode rather. So I don't always think that they view it as a joke when stuff is faked. I think that they just have to meet supply and demand kind of thing. And sometimes they can be pressured by certain people. Again, referring back to Most Haunted, Carl being a producer, I don't think he should ever be on the team because he's a producer. He is the guy who has the expectations of we need this to happen to get the views. His mind is with the views. It's not with legitimate investigating. And so as a result, I don't think any producer should ever work with a paranormal team while investigating, because the temptation for them to fake things to try and drive up the viewers is going to be astronomical, and you're not going to be able to trust it. So, yeah, Paranormal by the Sea then added by saying it's better off if they did it as mini-films and for entertainment purposes only, as it's an insult to those who are looking for the real paranormal. I don't think it's an insult. I think that it's annoying and frustrating, and kind of keeps the legitimate ones down. But I do agree that fake channels should advertise their content as for entertainment purposes only, or do it as mini films, because they're doing the techniques required to make some pretty decent effects half the time for mini films. So, you know, all the fake teams, they should band together and make these mini films. And if you look at certain investigations, the Overnight Channel, perfect example of this. I don't know if they're legitimate or not legitimate. I've not looked into them enough. But the way that their videos are done is very much so like mini films. When they start, it's very dramatic, quick cuts, dramatic music, dramatic title. They do have screaming, shouting, oh my god, did you hear that? What's going on? All of that stuff. So if they were fake, they'd absolutely smash it with mini films. Absolutely. And I think Elton has said he wants to do a mini film or a film in the future. So I think they could. And I think they are doing basically that. So if they're not legitimate, they should just come out, admit it, and then just be like, here's our mini films. We're making our own Conjuring franchise type thing, you know. And Joe Vitale then says a team said that they were going somewhere for the night. They were only there 4 hours. They got some footage of a sunrise, but it was actually of a sunset. And that when he revealed all of this, they went after his channel, and he couldn't live stream for months, even though he had a video of someone who did the tour saying that they were only there for 4 hours and that they lay on the floor pretending to sleep. Yeah, I again, this goes into what was being said earlier. I absolutely think some teams will go to places and they will fake how long they were there for. They'll lie about how long they were there for, and they will do reverse footage type stuff of that. And, you know, go on Trent ads by saying they're lying more about just paranormal activity. It's also the time of day, the location, and what they are doing while they're there. And it is a shame that there are so many layers of the fakery that can occur. And it is a shame that they don't just keep with being legitimate. Joe then says he had a person debunk a rocking chair that was within his own documentary. And he didn't argue with him because the person was right. And they did a video saying that he was right and that they'd been debunked. And Dolly from Paranormal by the Sea then said that's how things should be. It should be respectful between the investigators and the debunkers. And that they have learned by watching the debunkers to sit in a house and listen to the noises of the house. and get used to the sounds, and that they've even looked into the Victorian plumbing as a result of that. And I agree, this is how it should be, absolutely. It should be respectful between debunkers and investigators. As I possibly said on the last live stream, I think any investigator that is not willing to work with a debunker is not a legitimate investigator. I think if you're not willing to work with a debunker, you've got something to hide, and you know that they can probably find out what it is. So, yeah, investigators and debunkers should work together. I think all investigators who are legitimate should work together. All debunkers who are legitimate should work together. You should have this huge network of paranormal investigators, like you do with scientists, that all work together, share evidence, discuss locations. You should have that. I don't know why it doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. But anyone who's out to the side being like, no, I'm not speaking to them, I'm never working with them, you shouldn't trust them, probably, because if they're wanting to stay in their little bubble, they're not legitimate. They're not wanting to show that they're not legitimate, because they know if the word gets out, they can trust themselves with the word, but if that gets out to other people, they're going to get found out, and the word will spread, and then they will lose viewers, and therefore money, probably. So Beardo says he struggles to keep respectful to the fakers, and he's more respectful to the misguided, and will try and steer them in the right direction. 9 out of 10 times people are quick to say he's bullying them, and so he mocks and he makes jokes, and the fakers have a laugh at the real's expense, so he doesn't see why he can't have a laugh at the fakers' expense. I kind of half agree with him here. I think that absolutely you should be respectful to anyone misguided. I know in the past Beardo has said someone has said that he bullied them, but I looked at the post and they didn't say that. They did use the word bully, but they didn't refer to him specifically. So I do know Beardo can kind of look into things a little and take things a bit to heart. But yeah, if people are making poor content, if people are making poor content and faking things in a way where you can kind of see the fakery and whatnot, yeah, absolutely, some of it can be comical. I remember, Most Haunted, I watched one of their Halloween investigations, one of the parts for that, and Carl walked in on two ghosts going at it, and that was comedic. And if I was Beardo and I was looking at that episode in debunking, I'd absolutely tear it apart and laugh my head off at it, which I did laugh my head off at it, because everything about it, the reactions were just extremely funny. So yeah, some of this fake stuff, you can look at it and be like, that's comedic. And it's like, I remember watching the episode of my mum and Stuart saying he'd had an epiphany or whatever, or religious experience, or whatever it was he'd said. It was just comical. It was bizarre and comical. So regarding the fake paranormal, absolutely can laugh at it. Absolutely. But if it's just people being misguided, you still need to be respectful. And with the fake paranormal stuff, I still think, yeah, sure, laugh and joke, but you can still be respectful while you're doing that. There is a line which you can draw, and you can acknowledge as well if there's a team who you know are fake, but you're seeing some stuff that they're doing which is good practice. You can compliment it. You don't have to just stay on the attack with it. You can kind of back from me like, you know what, they're fake, but that they've just done, pretty good. I do think you can do that. So then that is the point in the video where Paranormal by the Sea leave and Kevka Paranormal is added and joins in. So that is that, I believe. That is all of part 2, which I have read through and discussed, which took just over an hour. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching this live stream. I will be live streaming every Wednesday at 8 o'clock, and I will release an article snippet, which is just going to be the first paragraph of an article read out over a slideshow. So that will be released at 6 o'clock every Wednesday as well. I released one earlier on today about Peter Popov. And if you want to read the articles that I write, every Monday there's a haunted location article. The next few Fridays will be the next few parts of the Beardo live stream. But then after that, I do have a list. I'll see if I can read some of the list. Just so you know what types of things to expect in the future. I'm going to be doing articles on the Djinn, Arthur Conan Doyle, the Fox Sisters, Daz Black, Jason Hawes, Robert the Doll, angels, demons, all of that kind of stuff. So I'd write a bunch of different things on a Friday. Investigators, haunted objects, spirit types, just random bits and pieces. But yeah, like I say, next few Fridays it will be continuations of the Beardo live stream. So thank you very much everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be informative. I will be live shortly on TikTok, basically just going through everything that I've gone through in this live stream, but TikTok's limited to an hour, so this video has gone a bit over an hour, so I can't upload it there, which is sad. So it'll basically just be a repeat of everything I've said here, but at a bit more of a rushed pace. So thank you very much everyone for watching, and I will see you next week, and I hope you enjoy all the articles. And a big thank you as well for September. Because September was an absolutely amazing month for the blog and for the database. So, yeah, thank you very much. And if you do share any of the articles, I will thank you at the end of the following article, as well as in the monthly appreciation post, which I will release on the first Tuesday of every month, I think. We'll see how that goes. It just happened 1st of October, landed on a Tuesday, so we'll see if that continues, but Tuesday seems like a good day. So thank you very much everyone, and goodbye.